and Agile DFW. The topic today, and just as a reminder to those of you who are returning attendees, this is our monthly webinars, and those who haven't, this is the first time, just as a background, we do these webinars almost once a month, and the topic is Agile or related to Agile software development. So the topic today is Product Portfolio Kanban. What we're going to accomplish today is address this tension and challenge that we have observed with our number of clients and other companies that we talk to, that what has happened over the last few years as Agile techniques have taken hold in software organizations, the software development teams have done very well gradually in practicing Agile and delivering to the value and the velocity with which they can deliver software functionality. But we find that many organizations are having challenges upstream and downstream from the software development team, meaning in the marketing, sales, support, deployment. Those parts of the organization have a harder time being able to adapt to the Agile rhythm of the development team. So what we'll do today is address that particular challenge and talk about this technique we call Product Portfolio Kanban, to really get to the heart of solving this organization-wide issue and making the Agile adoption even more impactful across the organization rather than just in the development team. And to talk about this topic, I'm delighted to have Eric Huddleston as a presenter. Eric is a real visionary when it gets to software practices, and he's unique in terms of not only being a visionary, but also kind of a guy who gets stuff done. Eric is a serial entrepreneur, has been a founder and CTO of a number of successful software companies, including Smart Technologies, which got acquired by I2, and Between Markets, which got acquired by Innovis. So he has had a good track record of getting stuff done and being very successful at it. Eric is passionate about Agile techniques and has been very effective in finding innovative ways to add variations to the Agile practices to make it actually work within the organizational and business challenges that we all face in the real organizations that we are in. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric to talk about the topic today. And by way of process, what we'll do is Eric will go over his presentation, and you're welcome to chime in on the question answer panel on the GoToWebinar with your questions, and I'll keep track of the questions. And unless the question is a burning question that ought to be addressed along the way, by and large, we'll hold the questions towards the end. So we'll have about 30 minutes or 35 minutes or so of prepared presentation, and then we'll take questions after that. So with that, Eric, let me make you the presenter so you can go through your PowerPoint document.
I appreciate it, and I also appreciate the very kind introduction. I've had the pleasure to interact with and be a part of many Agile teams over the years, from very small seed stage startups up through multi-$100-million primarily SaaS and software companies. So that's going to inform a lot of the worldview that I have around Agile topics. So those of you that are in IT organizations or in services organizations, you may have to do a little bit of translation between what I'm saying and some of the problems that you may be having. But as I believe we've all found over the last few years, that most Agile processes and techniques are fairly universally applicable if you can find the right secret decoder ring. So with that, in particular, the topic that we're going to be covering today is the unintended consequences of being wildly successful at Agile. So I've seen this several times now, having gone through several large-scale Agile rollouts, is that there's a ton of hard work that's required to get your Agile teams firing on all cylinders and wildly productive. But it's a fairly well-tread road these days. So the amazing case studies that have been published by companies like BMC, Innovus, Salesforce, and others have really laid out a pretty good blueprint for how to be successful in development agile rollouts. The challenge that we found is in what happens upstream and downstream in an organization once you achieve a high level of performance, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So I think it goes without saying that Agile and Lean have demonstrated enormous potential to drive high levels of productivity inside of development organizations. The case studies that I mentioned in terms of productivity increases, engineering time reduction, so how long does it take you to actually get something to market or out of development at least, the ability to be responsive, so reduce cycle time or increase release frequency depending on your worldview, and then the benefits of getting a well-oiled machine, or what the Lean guys refer to as flow, have all been very well documented, and I think rightly so, heralded as really the best-in-class methodologies and practices for development organizations today. Just as one very brief example from my background, I had the great fortune to participate in the Innovus rollout, which was documented both by Gartner as a case study, as well as the folks at QSMA, who is one of the most respected consultancies on development productivity. And here's just a couple of metrics that you can get some background on what we were able to produce with our Agile rollout in terms of effort. So in other words, how efficient are you at bringing resources to bear on a problem? How much labor does it take you to get to an end solution? We benchmarked a couple of releases here. You can see one in terms of thousands of lines of code, up in the hundreds of thousands of lines of code, which is a pretty typical large-scale initiative. We were able to almost cut in half the person months required for those sorts of initiatives, and for the sort of the Agile sweet spot, or those very small, rapid responses to the market, we were able to get an almost 2/3 reduction in the total person months required to deliver successfully. When you look at another metric, which is how much staffing was required for those projects, again, and this is maybe a little bit counterintuitive, but another one of the beautiful things about Agile is for very large initiatives, we were able to get minor efficiencies over industry average. So we were able to bring to bear a couple less heads to get the same output, but then on small initiatives, you can see that we were able to bring over 2x the number of people to bear on the same problem. So in large scale, you're trying to use less people. In small scale, you want to be able to use more people. So the metaphor that you can think about is how many developers can you get right in the same line of code at the same time? And we were able to get highly efficient at swarming on problems and delivering them fast and effectively with as many people as possible. So that's just background on Agile is absolutely a successful methodology, and I, as well as I'm sure others on the phone, have been there in terms of really delivering exceptional results as a development organization. Unfortunately, the greater the success in development, the more disruption typically that creates for the organization as a whole, both upstream and downstream from development. Here's just a few examples of what I'm talking about. So in marketing, some of the challenges that we've seen is that very quickly the launch cycle time, in other words, how long it takes marketing to go from I've got a collection of features to I've got that, sort of the PR engine in place, the collateral in place, the campaigns executed, and able to garner some success from it is actually longer. There's a point at which it crosses the development cycle time to get high quality code ready to go into customers' hands. When that happens, marketing melts because they're unable to harness the value that's coming out of the development organization. Likewise, one of the very first organizations that typically melts down when you get a high-performing Agile team, particularly in a SaaS mode or in IT organizations that have significant SLAs around hosted systems, is its operations around change management deployments. So a typical organization in a waterfall approach or a steady state non-Agile approach may have, a handful, a few dozen changes that will be put into, quarterly change windows, semi-annual change windows, or monthly change windows. When you get an extraordinarily high-performing Agile team, that can balloon to hundreds and hundreds of changes that need to go in every month or every couple of weeks, or if you look at some of the literature in the lean startup world around continuous deployment, literally multiple times a day. And operational processes, systems, and personnel typically are not prepared or staffed for that sort of level of activity change in the world. Likewise, if your product requires professional services to roll out or implementation support of some sort, training for customers, etc., then you get into a classic innovator's dilemma where you'll often have, if you have a well-performing professional services team, they're measuring themselves on things like utilization rates. So you'll have professional services staffs that are highly utilized with a backlog of business that spans a few months. And as you start piling on new releases, new features, new capabilities for customers to take advantage of, most professional services organizations just won't have the time allocated for training for them to be able to cope with those releases. So what ends up happening is professional services organizations end up learning on the job as they're actually deploying live customers or configuring live customer accounts or doing those other sort of value-added activities on top of the software, which leads to mistakes, miscommunications to clients that often result in business challenges. Likewise, with support organizations, you'll see a similar phenomenon where support organizations are measured mainly by efficiency and call metrics, and so the added training requirements that go around frequent releases will oftentimes make the establishment, your support managers, shift managers, support executives, the core metrics that they're using actually look worse than they would otherwise in a steady state. And so some of the tension that typically exists between support organizations that look for stasis in products and the rest of the organization that looks for new fresh features to drive revenue or cost efficiencies, that tension explodes. And product managers, it's well documented how product managers get blown up when Agile becomes successful. They get bogged down in the weeds, daily conversations with developers, helping them understand what's going on. They get pulled out of the field, so they're not getting the same level of input, and it becomes a challenge for product management to then cope with the new world of high-performing Agile teams. And then sales, in a very similar manner, just can't consume, your typical sales guy can't consume the value props and the unique selling benefits of this mountain of new functionality that's come out of the organization. And the list goes on. You could talk for hours about all of these sort of unintended consequences of Agile success. But suffice it to say, there's a lot of them. They're pervasive. They affect every corner of the organization when Agile is rolled out. And I hope that everybody on the webinar can sort of think internally to their own organizations about where those issues have cropped up or would crop up if you had a successful Agile rollout. So while that absolutely is the case, and Agile is, being successful in development with Agile is not all roses, by applying the exact same sort of principles that we've learned, particularly in the lean world, those issues can be avoided, and you can actually increase organizational value delivery versus Agile alone or the prior state of the organization. And while there's a wide variety of approaches, strategies that folks have taken to the broader application of lean principles to the organization, I'm going to focus in on 3 very practical, tangible practices that you can take back and start to think about or start to implement inside of your organization today. Those are going to be stakeholder-based investment themes and business case management. So in other words, how can you slice up what you're going to be working on in such a way as you can avoid some of the pain and heartache down the road. The second is how you can lay down a set of Kanban states or stages on top of your organization, and then enforce WIP limits to help provide some relief to the parts of the organization that are melting from development performance related issues, while they so that you can provide them some amount of relief. And then third, how you can actually maximize organizational value delivery in your organization through a very fascinating concept of dynamic allocation, which is really just starting to hit the early thinkers like Dave Anderson and the likes in terms of allocation of resource based on WIP constraints limits. So the first of those ideas or the food for thought for you to take back is a different way of managing your requirements process. So instead of thinking just in terms of user stories, which are great for a development organization, very fine-grained, the finest grain units of business value you can possibly deliver, instead start from the top down with a set of preferably stakeholder-aligned investment themes. So in other words, you get executive buy-in around, what are the strategic initiatives that we need to be delivering to our organization. I've got a little straw man here in the upper right-hand side of this slide to give you some thoughts around that. So for example, your marketing organization may have some strategic new market that they think that the organization needs to be penetrating, maybe a new vertical that you're going to be attacking. It could be a new product that you want to bring to market. Sales has identified a hole in the market that needs to be filled with a brand new product. It could be from an operations team that's saying, hey, we need to really get a handle, or a finance organization, we really need to get a handle around our costs. The application of the product is costing too much to maintain, and we really need to increase profitability of our existing customer base through some cost reduction initiatives. It could be you landed the largest deal in customer history, and so you now have a new master to serve, and trying to dig yourself out from under a bunch of promises that were made in the sales cycle. So you need some strategic focus on the strategic customer, or maybe a small group of new customers. And then some of the items that often come up is things like maintenance or sales-directed activities when those bluebirds come in the door. If only we had this one minor feature, we could close this amazing deal. So you build this portfolio, and then inside of each one of those investment themes, you start to break out your big epics, whether those are strategic initiatives or offerings. This is sort of classic Agile product management. For background on those sorts of requirements hierarchies, I would definitely encourage you to go look at the great work of Dean Leffingwell and his scaling enterprise agility research that he's done. You take these large epics; these are things that the organization's going to understand, executives across the company are going to understand, analysts, your customers understand, and then break them down into the individual features that make up those epics. Those are things that would probably make a bullet on a marketing slick would be a good example of that. Then those features can be broken down into those individual stories. Now, that one of the very important things that organizations should focus on when building this sort of requirements pyramid is to not only manage the requirements through the development process, but the business case that those requirements represent. So that will typically be at either the epic or the feature level. And by managing the business case, then you can start to get value from a company-wide Agile Kanban because you can start to see where, while the code may have gotten developed, where there may be bottlenecks in the organization that are hindering the realization of the business case associated to those requirements. We'll talk about that a little bit in the second recommendation, which is all around layering on a Kanban, both upstream and downstream from development. So on this slide, you'll see an example of what that Kanban may look like. And you can see that it starts all the way up in product management or in the executive ranks or your product council or wherever your product strategy function comes from, where all those great ideas are proposed. And the real operative gates for those early stages is business case development. And what you'll see then is you can start to manage your long-term roadmap gated on business case creation. Once you have sort of your long-term roadmap locked, then development organizations and your product managers can start to pull from that backlog of valuable business cases into a committed roadmap. Bearing on organization, some of the best practices that you see today is things like quarterly release cycles, where you're committing, to what's going to be the next, 6, 8, 10 sprints, roughly going to look like, typically at the feature level. And then every sprint, or if you run a Kanban process based on your capacity limits, you pull from that committed roadmap, and that starts to get your velocity and cycle time metrics so you can accurately report to the organization where you're at. Then once software is delivered, you manage it through the deployment stage, which is really marked by getting it to the point where it could go into customers' hands. In a SaaS environment, that's getting it onto production servers. In a packaged software environment, that may be getting it onto a download site or in the mail in the form of CDs to customers. Then the next phase in this proposed Kanban is all around enablement. This is the collateral and training that's required to really take advantage of those features. Some interesting sequencing discussions here, and you read a lot about this in the literature surrounding lean startups. But even if you aren't practicing lean startup practices around development and operations, there's still a significant amount of value to be had from the ability to decouple the deployment of features from the release of features. So in other words, you're able to get features into production environments without necessarily releasing them to customers, so that in parallel that you can be dealing with the enablement phase, whether that be generating collateral, generating training material, or the like for your organization. And then once it is released to customers, then it's all about the measurement of adoption of those features. Is marketing running campaigns against the feature? Is sales actively positioning the features in sales cycles? Are users actually using the new features that popped up in their application? And then once you get past that, you can do an analysis of both feature success and business case success. And there's a real difference between the two. So feature success is really the concept around is the feature being used by its intended audience, and is it being used successfully? So is it crashing? Is it slow? Is it counterintuitive? Those are all measures of feature success. By decoupling that from business case success or business case analysis, you can start to uncover the root cause for why a business case may have failed. The other thing that you'll see here as one of the critical elements is the idea of putting WIP limits in place on each of these stages. So instead of this sort of thing devolving into a classic stage gate process, what you see is that you're using the actual capacity of your organization to manage the flow of business value through the organization. In the early stages, those WIP limits are typically going to be capacity-based. For example, you may have your long-term roadmap, you may have a WIP limit that says you can only have 40% of your total development capacity committed on your long-term roadmap. So in other words, over the next year or 2 years, you can't externally commit more than 40% of your capacity. Likewise, you may say your committed roadmap over the next 90 days can't be more than 80% committed, so that you still have that agile ability to be flexible while still serving your constituents' interests of knowing what's coming. And then your in process is almost always WIP limited by capacity. So in a Scrum process, that might be story point totals for all of your teams in aggregate. If you're exercising a lean Kanban approach, then you're able to actually use a traditional item or slot based WIP limits there. And in the latter stages of your Kanban, it's almost always WIP limits based on number of items flowing through the Kanban process. So this allows you to gate how much change you're putting on different parts of your organization. And those WIP limits in the latter stages are almost always investment theme scope. So in other words, you might say for those cost reduction features that our operations guys are going to have to get trained on and start using, we may only flow no more than 5 features through them at any given time. Likewise, for the adoption phase of revenue generating new market features, we may limit those to 10 because that's really all our power users are going to be able to consume at a time. So once you have that requirements hierarchy, it's business case driven, and you have a Kanban in place that overlays the flow of information or business value through your organization, then you can start to do dynamic allocation to maximize the organizational value that you deliver. So to recap, we've got our requirements segmented by typically stakeholder concern, which will have different impacts on different areas of the organization. we've overlaid a Kanban that allows us to track where that business value realization is through the organizational process. And what that allows us to do is, when those bottlenecks or those issues do crop up, so we have the professional services team that has a 4-month backlog, they just aren't going to be able to train staff to deploy new features, for this quarterly release. Instead of continuing to pile another 10, 15, 20 features on top of the 10 that they already aren't going to be utilizing, you can dynamically reallocate that capacity from those new value features in red to, say, cost reduction features that don't really impact professional services as much as they do, for example, your operations staff. So in doing so, what you're able to do is you're able to provide relief to parts of the organization that haven't yet coped with the Agile process. You're able to identify where the bottlenecks are in the organization so they can get fixed, and you're able to understand why organizational value associated with new development hasn't been realized. So was it that the business case was just wrong, that the features are out there, they're being used, but they're not, they don't have the cost reduction impact you thought, or they don't have the sales volume that you expected? Or was it the fact that they got bogged down somewhere in the organization? Marketing just hasn't got around to building the collateral for it, or professional services hasn't yet been trained on how to actually get them up and running in production. So that dynamic reallocation allows you to optimize for the overall maximization of organizational benefit and provide you with a blueprint for how to increase the amount of organizational value you can deliver over time. So what does that example look like? Here's one example, again from Innovis, on what sort of results came out of their product portfolio Kanban release. What we're looking at here is market responsiveness. So how fast could they get results into the hands of customers and delivering business value back to the organization? And this is a little bit of an apples to oranges comparison, in that the QSMA database tracks releases out of development, where we track at Innovis business value delivery. So it's actually a much higher bar, but you can see the dramatic impact that the product portfolio Kanban approach had on our ability to respond to the market. So in the large delivery case, we were talking about around a 30 to 40% reduction in total elapsed calendar time to capitalize on the business value creation. And in the small case, you see the dramatic difference of almost 12x improvement in market responsiveness relative to the industry average. And that delighted our customers there as well. Similar results are starting to trickle in from other very large organizations, primarily, that have been adopting this Agile Portfolio Kanban approach. So with that, what's next? So what's happening in the world of Agile of product portfolio Kanbans? Well, the first thing is that the tooling that was developed at Innovis to support the process of product portfolio Kanbans has been outsourced. You can Google for Apropos, which is the Agile Project Portfolio Scheduler. It's an open source tool that allows you to overlay a Kanban across the organizational value delivery process. It's being picked up by the ALM providers now. So there's a couple of ALM providers including some big ones like Rally that have shown tremendous interest in the tool with great integrations to their software and delivery into the customer basis. And likewise, we're seeing that adoption both in organizations, typically larger organizations trending to smaller organizations. So a couple of large Fortune 500 companies have now deployed this process, and we're seeing more and more of the ALM tool vendors either integrate directly to the open source tool that was put out there, or committing to providing product portfolio capabilities into their existing systems. So with that, I will turn the floor back over, and if there's any questions, would love to answer those on these topics or topics related to how you get value once you have Agile up and running.
Thanks, Eric. That was excellent. So folks, the audience on this webinar, here's what we'll do from here on. So you have a few minutes now to digest the thoughts that Eric shared and come up with any questions. There are a few questions already in the queue. But if you have any questions, think about them and type them into your Q&A panel on the GoToWebinar. And while you're doing that for the next few minutes, what I'll do is I'll take a brief introduction to Synergip for those of you who have not worked with us or have had no exposure to Synergip. We'll take a few minutes just talking about Synergip in a couple of pages, and then we'll come back and take the questions that have come in the Q&A panel. So with that, you should be able to see my screen now, which I'm going to the next screen, which is Synergip in a nutshell. Eric, right? I mean, you are able to see the screen from here, right? So Synergip is a software product development partner focused on working with small to mid-sized companies. We are exclusively focused on, or while we do once in a while, we do serve larger clients, but our almost exclusive focus is small to mid-sized companies, and the emphasis is on the word partner. Software development is hard enough, as you all recognize, and we believe that the partnership model is the best model. We support full software development lifecycle relationship with our clients, from new designs to QA and testing, or to deployment and support. And we have realized that it is better for us to be technology and industry domain agnostic. So whether it is Java J2E development or Microsoft .NET or Ruby on Rails or what have you, doesn't matter. And whichever industry it is, whether it is supply chain or legal software or it is document management, we lean on our clients to bring the domain expertise while we provide the product development expertise. For each of our clients, we put together a dedicated team of high caliber software professionals who seamlessly extends your local team. But it is not a staff org model. We have a high degree of involvement with our teams in delivering to the goals of our partners, who are our clients. And we believe we actually end up, given our experience in software product development, we end up reducing the risk for our clients. Many of our clients tend to be small to mid-sized companies, as I mentioned, and many of them lack sometimes the discipline and the know-how for software product development. If they're really early stage innovative startups, sometimes they have a bright idea but may not have the rigor and the discipline of software product development. So we're able to bring that in and provide, reduce the risk. And we are a big believer of agile development, as you have seen from all our webinars and our work with our clients. The fourth point is we have a dual shore development team. We have a small team on the US side in Austin and Dallas primarily, and a larger team in India. And given the dual shore team, we're able to provide a 50% cost advantage to our clients in doing the development work. And the last point is the flexibility. We are unique as a company to provide a flexible option to our clients, that with a dedicated team that works with them, they can turn that team over into their captive operation whenever they feel like doing it, commonly known as a BOT option in the industry: build, operate, transport. So those are the key highlights to have you understand Synergip in a nutshell. The next page just shows a glimpse of some of our clients. It's not the exhaustive list, but as you see, there's a bias towards small to mid-sized companies, because we feel that those are the companies that really need the help that we can provide of software development with dual shore model following agile practices. and the bias, you see a bias towards Texas. We have most of our clients tend to be in Austin, Dallas, Houston. So with that introduction of synergy, let's come back to taking the questions that you have. So Eric, I'm going to go through. I've already shortlisted some of the questions, and I'll keep tracking the questions on the panel here. So one of the first basic questions that I see that I think will be good to take is if you can give a bit of a education to the broad audience we have on people are familiar with Agile. There's some familiarity with the Lean, and now with Kanban. Can you give a little highlights of what's really the difference, fundamental thought process difference across Agile, Lean, and Kanban, and where can people learn more about Kanban as it is taking hold in the Agile community?
Absolutely. So Kanban has its roots in the Toyota manufacturing process, where Toyota found that they were able to get dramatic quality improvements and cycle time reductions with less waste through the use of pull models on their assembly line. So they would have markers which represented resources, which they would move from station to station. You take a marker out of a bin, and when the bin's empty, the bin went off to get filled again. It was interesting, and it really started to open, I think, not just the discrete manufacturing world's eyes to some fundamental truisms for the production of anything that there's really sort of turned into the Lean principles that you see today. They're very close cousin to what everybody knows and loves in the Agile world with Scrum or XP or some of the other flavors of Agile methodologies. The Kanban model is just one that's probably the sort of like the Scrum of Lean. So Scrum is to Agile as Kanban is to Lean.
Okay, right. Any resources you can point people to learn more about Kanban and how it is being applied in the software world now?
Yeah, a couple of things that I would do. One is I would Google Dave Anderson. He's the guy these days around applying Lean principles to software development. And then if you Google Kanban, you'll see a very interesting mix of resources. It'll be dominated actually by software, which is interesting since Kanban is a manufacturing process, not necessarily a software process. And Kanban refers to the board, the Kanban board, which will have little cards on it. The cards will move through the stages of Kanban. And so you can get some very dramatic visualizations, and you saw that in some of my early slides, where you see these little boards, and that's some of the best ways to just really have it crystallize what it's all about.
Excellent. Let's take the next question, which is around the organization. So in your presentation, you covered the upstream and the downstream organizational entities that need to get involved in bringing the overall transformation. So what level of executive education or organizational education on these principles is called for upfront, so people can actually, organizational entities rather, can actually wholeheartedly adopt this and be successful, and what kind of an ongoing education and training is needed for this to actually work in real world?
Yeah, so I'll give two answers to that. Sort of the pure answer is not only for a product portfolio Kanban approach or any other approach to applying Lean or Agile principles to the value delivery, organizational value delivery process. To be successful, always has to have executive buy-in, sponsorship to be really effective, and that applies not only upstream and downstream, but even just an Agile rollout or a Lean rollout. if you don't have executive support for it, it becomes an uphill battle. Now, then that said, some of the greatest need and most enthusiasm that's been received in the adoption of that product portfolio Kanban approach has come from organizations where that support for Agile has not been organization-wide or has not been universally accepted at the executive levels. And the reason for that is its unique ability to pinpoint why there's a lack of sort of business case realization from the software. So what you'll see is development will deliver a bunch of stuff and it won't sell, and somebody in the organization will squawk that Agile thing was worthless because sales are exactly where they are, or costs are exactly where they are, or whatever the key metrics are. And so almost out of self-defense, the product portfolio Kanban approach can be overlaid on an organization to sort of start to put some highlights around where the organizational issues or dysfunctions are that are causing a breakdown in value delivery. Now, obviously, that's not the ideal world, but it is the world that some folks find themselves in.
Aside from the executive, any advice on the training to other parts of the organization on these principles of Kanban for them to adopt, like support or deployment and so on?
Absolutely. So, in general, it's very wise to get all of your stakeholders, upstream and downstream, involved in an education process around what the heck it is that you're doing. In particular, when rolling out a product portfolio Kanban, this actually gives you some tools to make the pill go down a little easier. Agile rollouts are a double-edged sword. In some ways, people get incredibly enthusiastic and charged by the things that they've been complaining about for years are finally getting fixed. But then as the water never abates, they get a little waterlogged, and just the sheer amount of change that occurs starts to create friction. So one of the things that can then be used is those WIP limits that we talked about for the latter stages of the Kanban can become particularly useful to help sort of provide some relief to parts of the organization that are just now coming to terms with or trying to cope with the organizational change and dynamics that occurs with successful Agile or Lean rollout.
Okay, great. Let's take another question. I'm going to combine a couple of questions that are here into one, which seems to be a common theme to these questions, which is what's the granularity for the business case analysis? I think you touched upon upfront the business case analysis at a epic level or above that. So what's the granularity for business case analysis, and how do you really do what some organizations tend to do, but it's portfolio risk management and ROI kind of analysis? So at what granularity and how do you do that?
Right. So in terms of granularity, the finer grain a business case can be made, the better. The most important thing is that it's tied to some set of features to be delivered. Now, there may be a bunch of other things that have to happen along with those features to make the business case successful, but one of the challenges is if you can't directly tie a business case to the work that you're doing, then both the defensibility and the prioritization processes break down very, very, very rapidly and lead to both sort of organizational dysfunction and sort of a reduction in the overall potential benefits delivered to the organization. In terms of how you do them, it really depends on the type of organization that you're in. Typically, you're going to associate them either at the ethic level, which is usually the easiest way because it more closely aligns to an organization's strategic planning process, or a traditional product management organization's business case development processes, because epics typically will align either one for one or close to it to either executive level strategic initiatives or to particular products or offerings. The challenge with epic level business cases is that it's much more difficult to measure success or to leverage agile or lean success as a tool in maximizing business case realization or maximizing the reduction of risk associated with business cases. So a best practice is if you can get the business case associated at the feature level, that's typically the best, and particularly if you have like a SaaS application, that becomes very powerful. So you're able to tie features directly to competitive responses, for example, which you can then translate to conversion rates or competitive wins, competitive takeaway percentages. It's easy to track that, and it's easy to build a business case around that. It's also easy to tie internal cost reduction business cases at a feature level. So for example, you can say, if we built the automated user importer, then it would eliminate 2 hours per customer setup, or whatever the case may be. So that granularity becomes much more meaningful to measure. It also allows for a product organization to do a better job of allocating investment. So in other words, if you have a big epic that has 50 features and 300 stories, if I have business cases at the feature level, then I can double down on my money. If I've got a feature or two that have had great returns to their business cases, I can invest in more features in that epic and have a higher probability of success than more speculative investments of my resources. So it becomes valuable there. For the last part of the question and how you actually do them, I always like to do, and business case development is obviously like a crazy big topic, but probably a great one for a webinar in and of itself. You want to be sure that your business cases can be as light as possible and still sort of actionable and valuable to the organization. Clearly tied to hard dollar either cost savings, revenue, or other key metric that drives the business. Otherwise, if you get into soft dollar, it becomes much harder to defend an investment decision or prove that investment was successful. And then the last component of that is, you want to, and it's almost like, I'm sure that there's an analogy to sort of like the acid properties of a database. The last thing that you want to do is you want to be sure that business case is isolated, so as much as possible. So it has as few other dependencies as possible to other things that have to happen in the world for that business case to be successful. So the more it can be tied purely to the delivery of code successfully to the market, with a reasonable degree of documentation, training, marketing, sales support, operational support, and quality levels, etc., the better off you are.
Okay, excellent. Let's take another question. You touched upon the WIP a lot, talked about how to arrive at WIP limits based on capacity in the upstream stages and so on. Could you talk a little bit about how do you, in the real organization, how do you enforce the WIP limits, or do you really need to do that?
Yeah, that's actually an interesting question. So when you look at upstream WIP limits, so in other words, enforcing WIP limits on what's essentially your roadmap, you really have to get some buy-in from whoever owns whoever the primary stakeholders are. So in most organizations, it's going to be a product management organization. However, if you're in an IT department, that may be line of business owners or some IT business liaison role, and really the enforcement comes in just what you're going to entertain in terms of commitment. So as a development organization, if you look at it from development centric, upstream, I enforce my WIP limits because I just won't track anything above and beyond whatever I've set as my capacity-based WIP limits. My 40% total allocation for my long-term roadmap, or whatever the case may be. And now then other groups may track whatever the heck they want. They just aren't going to have my commitment around them on it being successful. Now then downstream is another place where you really need some cooperation. So as a development organization, you can sort of project those WIP limits based on what you see. When you see a breakdown in the organization, when operations calls uncle at the 901st change of the month, then you can start to use those metrics around which you cause either organizational dysfunction or organizational breakdown to be sort of the metrics you use for setting WIP limits. And then you can sort of float them based on the organizational sort of maturation and adaptation to the Agile process. And then the last point I would make on setting those downstream WIP limits, it's another good place to get your stakeholders buy-in around, particularly if you have like a product management organization, because some of the feedback has been that one of the greatest assets, but sort of a risk to be aware of with the Product Portfolio Kanban is it calls attention to problems in the organization, and folks aren't always appreciative of the spotlight being shined on their dirty laundry. So that would be the last point. So you really need some air cover if you're going to step on toes with things like dynamic allocation.
Right. Let's take one final question and we'll then wrap up. I think we are running out of time. But this is an important question about the metrics. So you have touched upon this in your discussion today a couple of times. But an organization, given the number of entities that are involved in this product portfolio Kanban process, how do the organizational metrics change, or are they impacted, and what do you recommend more appropriate metrics that are typically followed in organizations that ought to be followed for successful adoption of product portfolio Kanban?
Absolutely. So there's a great set of development metrics typically associated with like a lean rollout inside of a development organization. And many of those are also appropriate for Product Portfolio Kanban. In particular, cycle time is a key metric, and that cycle time needs to be tied to business case delivery, or not to feature delivery. So in other words, you're building cycle time metrics around the business case realization. So that's one key metric. Another key metric that I would call out is adherence to your investment theme allocation commitments. So this is a great way of building credibility in the organization and removing development from being sort of the bad guy in allocation of resources. So if you can measure how close to your ideal allocations you came, say we've got, we committed we were going to invest 25% of our resources in, conquering financial services or, retail, and I can come back and show some metric that shows, hey, we spent 24.8% of our resources. That's credibility gaining and reinforces the overall sort of discipline and success of the process. The next metric that I would call out that would be critical is a two-parter, and it's really the ultimate thing to measure. The first is business case realization. So you need to have some inspect and adapt process around the business cases associated with your features, and so you need to know what bets were right, what bets were wrong. And in hand with that is the idea of feature success. And there's been a pretty good chatter among the Agile pundits around this topic, which is to say you need to measure outside of just whether it was a good idea to implement that feature, were you successful in the implementation of that feature? So, you know, was it fertile ground for that business case to be realized, or was it doomed from the start? Some things that you may want to look at in that bucket is things like quality metrics, things like availability metrics, usability of features that you can get either by user survey or stakeholder survey, so that you can understand whether or not the fact that you failed miserably to get an extra $4 million in sales from attacking the retail market, was that because the features that you built were crummy, they weren't usable, or that was just a dumb business case. It just didn't work. It was a bad bet, and you lost. And so being able to track those two metrics, so you can really get to root cause analysis on why you're being successful or why you're not being successful in any given area becomes key.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Eric, for excellent presentation on Product Portfolio Kanban and all the questions that you have handled. So thank you all the audience. We have come into our time wall of 1 o'clock, so we're done here. Thank you again, Eric, and we'll see you guys all in the next webinar. The presentation will be available on our website. We'll send a follow-up email sometime later today or tomorrow with a link to the session.